our former colleague at KGO. He's back from vacation, John Rothman.
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm so glad to be back. I've been straining at the reins to get back.
We love your energy, John Rothman. Where were you? In Europe, right?
We were in the Baltic. So I did a week in Amsterdam, and then we took a cruise, which took us to Estonia, to Poland, to Germany.
Wow.
It was a fascinating. We had a wonderful time in Denmark. It was good.
Yeah.
Where are my weed smokers at?
I don't know. Is weed legal in Denmark? It is, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yes. And let me tell you what they're doing in Denmark. I talked about this on the Voice of San Francisco. They're moving the red light district.
Wow.
And they're moving it because, well, it's in a great location. They want to use it for business.
I see.
Stay at home and get baked.
Yeah.
So I say, why can't we do that here in San Francisco? Just take Cap Street and move it somewhere else.
It is wild. They've had that red light district. It's massively famous internationally.
You know, we walked through it, and I wanted a picture taken with two women of the night, and they won't allow it. You're not allowed to do it. Their privacy is more important than my publicity.
I see. So you said, then I'll just have a number 5, whatever.
What?
You see what that is? A number 5.
No, but it was amazing.
You know what I meant, Albert. Thank you.
Somebody opened the door, and some guys went in, and the whole street started cheering. And I said, what are they cheering? They said, John, don't you understand what's going on here? And, of course, the naive innocent that I am, I had no idea.
Well, I am wham, bam, Rothman does Amsterdam. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, B.A. Ware. Wow.
You know, we used to say there was the state song, and it was Amster, naughty word.
I see. Yeah. Well, I'm interested in your take on many things, John Rothman. I'm going to start with what's happening in the presidential race, which is now in a place where polling is relevant. But I also think we're in a dead heat situation. Clearly, the one thing I would say to you, and then I really will be quiet and just let you speak, is that if you look at trends, if you're concerned with trending, which maybe is something to focus on or at least take note of, certainly the trend line favors Kamala Harris. Now you.
I agree. It was fascinating in Europe. People don't understand America. How can you vote for Donald Trump? People just don't get it. And I tried to explain, but even my explanations, frankly, were inadequate. So my sense is Harris is going to win. But the most critical moment will be when we appear together next Wednesday, because the debate is Tuesday night. And Mark, that may be the most significant moment in the campaign between Harris and Donald Trump. But all I can tell you is if you go, as I did, to Estonia, and you talk to people in Estonia, which I did, I really try to listen to what people have to say. They're terrified that if Trump is elected president of the United States, America will withdraw from NATO, that Eastern Europe will be gone. And look what's happening in Ukraine, for God's sake. Why aren't we screaming as loudly as we can what the Russians are doing now, and the Ukrainians are hitting back, and the tensions are escalating, and nobody reported that the Russian foreign minister said this could lead to a nuclear war. Well, I hope it doesn't lead to a nuclear war, but I'm scared of what we are not confronting in America. If I were in charge of that debate next week, I'd be talking about foreign policy. I'd be talking about Ukraine. I'd be talking about NATO. I'd be talking about Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. I'd be talking about Poland. We were in Poland. We were in Gdansk, the place where solidarity began. They're scared out of their wits. They think we have no controls on Putin, and no one's talking about it. I come back here, and I've been back 4 days and sort of recovering from jet lag, a little bit of a cold, and I'm listening to the discussions, and I'm underwhelmed.
Well,
what can I tell you?
I would say 2 things about that. First of all, of course, coming from the Baltics and coming from that area of the world, you are going to carry with you a little bit of that orientation into the conversation, and that's a good thing. But by the same token, that's not the perspective that Americans naturally, reflexively assume. They are about
You're right.
the economy. They're about domestic policy primarily. In fact, I think if you ask most Americans about the Baltic region, they wouldn't really know what you're talking. I don't mean that as a put down. I mean that, look, they're busy with their lives in certain ways. Whenever I say this kind of thing, I get in the chat, what are you talking about, Mark? People have a right, have to, as informed citizens, know these things. Yeah, they do and they don't. The country's made up of a whole range of people who are informed at different levels. Anyway, to the point. Here, it's about domestic policy primarily. You're right. I mean, that international policy, and with a hot war going on in Ukraine, it probably should weigh in at the same level. But it's interesting from a Democrat-Republican standpoint. Do you go for the Democrat? Do you go for the Republican? Ukraine is an interesting issue. How do you see it from a political calculus standpoint shaking out in terms of, do you go with the Democrat, do you go with the Republican on the issue of Ukraine?
Ukraine isn't even on the map in American political discussion. It should be, and voters of Eastern European descent in the Midwest should have a huge impact. They may in Michigan. People don't understand there's a large Eastern European population, and that's going to be interesting. Let me quickly, I wish I had an answer, but talk for a minute about what's going on in the Middle East. The Justice Department yesterday issued indictments against leaders of Hamas. What took them so long? And I think that is a real question. There is no doubt that the Middle East is a very tough issue because, frankly, Hamas is the obstacle. And interestingly enough, all the demonstrations in Israel demanding Netanyahu's removal, the only point I make is if Netanyahu vanished tomorrow, the problem would still be there. Hamas is not going away.
But 2 points. Just on the first thing, it's not really that important, but let me just make the point. If you want to find something that doesn't matter to voters, you just mentioned it, which is not the Middle East problem. That matters a lot. It's the Justice Department naming Hamas in some kind of legal action. That is absolutely immaterial to most voters. Now, that said, what you have
except that
touched on,
Americans were killed. And that is the argument they're making, that we as Americans have an obligation to protect whoever our people are. And that is the reason why the indictment came down.
Thank you. I mean, thank you. I get it. So that is relevant from that standpoint. I guess what I'm saying is that it hasn't achieved a kind of altitude that maybe it should in the American political discourse. But what I did want to mention is the Middle East, which is quite the opposite. That entire conflict has captured a lot of attention. Schools are coming back in, John, as you know, college campuses roiling with all of these protests and encampments and all the rest. And they've changed even school policy as to, what they'll tolerate, what they won't. And
school presidents. The president of Columbia had to resign.
Sure. So when you talk about Israel, because on this you have some insight, it is clear based on the fact that the streets of Israel are filled with protesters against Netanyahu, that they don't necessarily agree that the peace would be at hand, or at least a ceasefire would be at hand, had you Hamas made a deal. They feel had you made a deal, Netanyahu, peace would be at hand. The often cited situation right now is these hostages who were just murdered in cold blood, they would be alive had Netanyahu made the deal with Hamas. Didn't you get some of that from the people that you're in touch with?
Sure, but the simple truth is Hamas wants to kill all the hostages. They've said it again. You're not dealing with rational people. Hamas is a terrorist organization.
But wouldn't a deal with Hamas, some kind of ceasefire, have at least saved those sweet souls that were killed?
I don't know. Nobody knows. Those sweet souls, as you refer to them, have been prisoners, hostages, tortured, sexually mutilated, as we know. So I don't have a kind word for it. Look, the most interesting thing is they say, well, they're trying to cut a peace deal. This is not a peace deal. This is a deal to try to save the lives of Americans and Israelis and Jews. And it's a tragedy. And there is no answer because Hamas remains firmly committed to the destruction of Israel and, frankly, to the destruction of Jews. And as long as they have that attitude, no matter what deal you cut, you're still going to have the same problem. It's sort of like the school shootings that you talked about with Kim at the very opening. Look, the headline of the Chronicle this morning, shooting complicates SF mayoral campaign. Well, what do you expect when you have guns completely loose? It has nothing to do with who is mayor of San Francisco. And I think that one of the most unbelievably difficult things to deal with is we have to have somebody to blame, Mark. Whether it's Netanyahu or Hamas or a shooter with a gun, we in the media, and I think in general, want to know who's responsible. And unfortunately, for a lot of these questions, there are no real answers. I don't think a shooter in Union Square, who was after a Rolex, not the personality who was shot, gives a tinker's damn one way or the other. May I ask you a question? Why is it that the media and the politicians aren't talking about the shooters and the shooting? Why aren't they talking about gun control or at least background checks or something? I listened to Kim, whose daughter, 15 years old, was back at high school. Kim, you're right. It's not just your daughter. It's all of our daughters, all of our sons. And what do we hear? A deafening silence, except you will hear Republicans say, well, this is such a sensitive moment. You can't raise the issue of guns now. Well, if not now, when?
You mentioned the blame and how people are looking for someone to blame. And this is, though asinine, this is what's happening on your channel, Fox News. They say,
excuse me, whose channel?
You're the one that watches it. I don't know.
You're the one who always says, my doctor says I have trouble with blood pressure, so I watch the Fox News.
Let me tell you, on the cruise, there was no CNN. There was only MSNBC or Fox.
Oh,
MSNBC did such a poor job, I had to watch Fox.
Oh.
I was bouncing off the walls.
Well, they say today that Kamala Harris, this is in regards to the shooting of the 49er, Ricky Pearsall. They said Kamala Harris was the California Attorney General when Prop 47 passed. She wrote the title and summary for that proposition. And they say, is it fair to ask her about the legacy that is left behind in California, somehow putting the blame on Kamala Harris for what happened to this player? Yeah.
You know, listen, I blame Mark Thompson for everything. I can do that with a clear conscience. It may not be true, but I can do it.
Sure.
Thompson, party of four.
Yeah, I know you're absolutely right. So you're saying in a political season, blame Kamala Harris, blame your opponent for everything, every ill in all the world.
That's right. And that's what's going to happen. And that applies in this shooting today in Georgia. No one is going to point the finger, as it ought to be pointed, at the fact that we have no real controls on guns. We don't even have required background checks. It's astounding to me. And I say it with all the indignation that I can muster. But this is whether or not, and it's interesting, whether or not a week from last night, gun violence will become an election issue. And how will Donald Trump deal with it? But it's the same thing. The one thing I learned on this trip was very interesting. It had to do with a woman's reproductive rights. Donald Trump has been everywhere on reproductive rights. He's been for a woman's right, opposed a woman's right, for. The man is completely, it seems, limitless in his ambiguity and political expediency.
Well, Trump is not underpinned by any political philosophy whatsoever. He just wants to get elected, and he'll say to whatever constituency he's speaking before,
you're right,
whatever they want to hear. So you're absolutely right. Just on the gun, the one distinction I would make, and because of course you're completely right, as we've said, you just assign blame to your political opponent, regardless of what the issue is. But the one difference here, and it's a remarkable one, is kind of what Kim was saying, which is, and Fox News Channel, I mean, they're a substantial...
No, it's Fox. It's not news. Fox and news is an oxymoron.
Yeah, I say Fox News Channel because Fox is where I used to work, and they have The Simpsons, and they have a bunch of other shows that you like to watch, and that's the Fox that I think of. But Fox News Channel, even if it is in quotes news, the group there does the dirty work for you. They do the blaming. So that's what Kim was saying. They blame Kamala Harris.
Yes,
you
right.
don't need to blame Kamala Harris because Fox will do it for you. It's a tremendous propaganda instrument, Fox News, for the right.
It's true. And the thing that stunned me, because it was Fox or MSNBC or BBC, by the way, which BBC was pretty good. I enjoyed their coverage. MSNBC on these on the ship was completely inadequate in every way. And I don't know why CNN wasn't there, or for that matter, ABC, CBS, NBC, nothing. One of the things, Mark, that you and I are going to have to monitor is I'm convinced that how this election turns out will basically depend on what media you watch. If you watch Fox, you believe with perfect faith. And interestingly enough, on this trip, I talked to a lot of people. I learn more when I talk with people than at people. And what I learned, I was with a lovely couple. They believe with perfect faith everything they hear on Fox. And even when I pointed out errors, or that Fox had to apologize, or that Fox had lost a major lawsuit, almost $1 billion, made absolutely no impression. And that is, to me, a real tragedy in American politics.
Well, it has certainly changed the nature of American politics in scary ways. And when I hear the story about the couple who believes everything, yeah, it's all very scary. I wanted to share a couple of comments with you, John Rothman. You are a folk hero, as you know, within our group. And Julie says, Tinker's Dam. So good. Reminds me of my daddy. Remember you say, I don't give a tinker's damn. That's like something like out of a Jimmy Stewart movie. I don't give a tinker's damn who they are.
It's like warming. It's like warming the cockles of your heart.
Thank you. Yeah, these
you
are
can't
all those
use that
lines.
Either.
They are going away. Tinker's Dam is going away. Glad you could bring it back to life for a moment here. Let me just see. I wish I had more for the show. And John Rothman says Pamela Kirby. John Rothman is highly valued. Big vet bill recently, I see. That's what she's saying. Otherwise, she would have given even more to the show. Wow, $5 super
big shout out
chat from her. Thank you anyway, Pamela.
Thank you
and I
very
hope your
much.
Vet situation. I'm looking to see if there's anything else you need to comment on. Bring back to Gaza. Here we go. This is from Brian.
Big shout out.
Big shout out to Brian. Thank you for an $18 super chat. The 18, he says, speaks to life. Welcome back, John. We missed you. The life you bring to our Wednesdays is precious. Thank you, MT and KM, Tony and Albert. Bring back the Gaza hostages now with lots of love. Brian. Yeah.
May I just say, I didn't know this, but the young American who was killed in this last round, my niece was his pre-kindergarten teacher in the East Bay. And
wow.
There was an outpouring of affection and love. These are not abstracts. These are real people. And so I just wanted to point that out quickly.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right to do it, too, because too often it's skipped over. You know, they just become a number of hostages. I agree with John Rothman as to what media you listen to, and for the most part, nobody is doing regular TV these days. Instead, it's all internet. So then basically what you have is Fox or CNN or MSNBC. That's from Cheryl, and that's true within the mainstream way in which television is delivered. Increasingly, there are alternative outlets because, as you said, nobody is doing regular TV these days. I think that's a decent point. You know, John, in addition to the Fox thing, which you were saying has, you know, sort of changed things, the alternative media now has a much greater influence on the political discourse than they used to have. I'm talking about, you know, platforms like this one, YouTube or podcasts, et cetera. People.
TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok's immense. TikTok is immense. Yeah. So things are changing, and one's ability to manage some of these information streams changes with it.
And that's why the Russian interference case, which was discussed earlier on the Mark Thompson program, is so critical. The Russians had a huge impact in 2016, and they intend to have a huge influence in this election. And their vehicle is the use of the new media. And I don't know what the impact will be now. I can tell you in 2016, we played on KGO some of the misinformation that was put out by the Russians. I'm intrigued by the fact that this is being raised as an issue now. And there's no doubt who the Russians are for.
It's funny about that because Trump says he's very tough on the Russians.
Where?
Yeah.
How? I haven't seen it.
He was just saying it in his stump speech and also on his, I don't know what you'd call that, conversation with Lex Friedman and Mark Levin. So
I listened to the Mark Levin interview. These are shills. This is not legitimate journalism. Right. Mark, on your program or my program, we ask tougher questions. I had no problem asking a tough question. Do you know that Mark Levin is the guy who started this whole thing about Kamala Harris being a communist? What does Donald Trump now say? Comrade Kamala.
Right.
Comrade Kamala. It's unbelievable that that's allowed.
It's interesting. This is, I like this, Peter, you're right. Comment, please, on Elon Musk and X being used as online propaganda as well. This is a really good point. Elon Musk is an immensely powerful guy. We talk about it here. One of his powers is control of this platform, the social media platform X. And he is right out there with everything you're talking about, John. All the propaganda about communism, socialism, fascism, and he assigns it to Kamala Harris and the Democrats. His rhetoric is getting sharper and sharper. It's really intense. In fact, I have a tweet from this morning. I'll find it. But it's scary because he controls that platform and he can have the algorithm downplay any kind of opposing opinion.
No, you're absolutely right. This is a far cry from Colonel McCormick in Chicago or William Randolph Hearst, who were media moguls who controlled what people read and thought because there was diversity of opinion. Elon Musk is a horrifying figure to me, not because he isn't smart, not because he doesn't make a lot of good points, but because Elon Musk has a monopoly and people listen to what he has to say. And frankly, a lot of what he has to say is pure nonsense. Did you hear the interview Musk did while I was on vacation with Donald Trump?
Yeah, it wasn't an interview. That was a conversation,
yeah,
and it started with, I support you, I'm supporting you with money, and I think you are the right choice for the future of America.
It's just terrible.
That's how he started the interview.
I know. It's not legitimate journalism. Whatever you say about what we did on KGO, and I'm very proud of almost 3 decades on that talk station, we invited a diversity of opinion. We had talk show hosts who were left, right, libertarian, off the wall. There was a real mixture of thought and ideas. And by the way, the Trumpists who enjoyed, I think, what I did on KGO, because I always gave them a chance to speak, gave them a rope to hang themselves, to be very honest with you. But we don't have that interplay. We don't have that dialogue. And I miss that in this campaign. And there's no balance in this campaign. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. But next Wednesday, we'll really analyze the Tuesday night debate. And I don't know who's going to win the debate because we don't know the ground rules, in fact. We don't know the way Donald Trump and Kamala Harris will respond to each other. Do you know that Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have never been in the same room at the same time? They've never met each other personally. The first time they will meet will be on that stage. So there's a lot of interaction, a lot of interplay, which I'll be looking for. And may I say, Mark, I value what you do, and I urge people to support the Mark Thompson program, but I regret that commercial radio is completely absent, because can you imagine the field day you and I would have had with commentary on a KGO type station.
Oh, it would have been terrific. And what we did, I think, in a couple of instances when we all sat in on various major events like this one, yeah, it's a true a setback, and it's really, if I can just speak to a broader issue, but this is really the issue in America. And I see this in chat rooms, and I hear this on other shows when you talk about capitalism and failed capitalism and communism and all the rest. Guys, take all of that crap and all those labels, put them aside. You can tell just in the KGO example that John Rothman gave. You had mergers like crazy and acquisitions like crazy by a big media company like Cumulus, okay? That was the company that owned KGO. And what that did was that reduced competition, it reduced quality, and you end up with decision-making that's associated with this station, KGO, which was this outpost for talk, free talk radio. You lose that ability to retain that station because it's just one more thing in their holdings, in their portfolio. And as a result, it's easy to get rid of Rothman, Thompson, Thurston, et cetera, Nikki, and you essentially turn the station over to automated syndicated programming that costs you nothing. You have a rev share with it, and so you end up getting rid of KGO and running a sports gambling station. What is my bigger point? This is the important thing, that it's not capitalism that is the problem. Capitalism, to me, is great. Capitalism produces competition. Capitalism has built-in incentives for people to perform and to provide services and all of these things at the highest levels. But corporatism, the merging of various businesses and companies, unfettered, unregulated, that is the undoing of America. And so you end up with this separation of those with a whole lot of money from those who really can't get a piece of the pie. That's been permitted and enabled by this corporatism. It started with Reagan, really, and it has been really unfurled through the decades.
And that's dangerous.
The problem with America.
It's a danger to democracy. And we all need to understand that. I dread, and I know that I'm supposed to be relatively nonpartisan in my analysis. I dread the thought of Donald Trump back in the White House because I think our rights, our ability to communicate, all of that will be limited profoundly. And for those who say I am too extreme or too alarmist, I'm not nearly as extreme or as alarmist as I ought to be. And I say that respectfully. And the Republican Party, if Donald Trump loses, as I hope and pray he will have to go through the process of reevaluating, of reforming itself. It's not the first time the Republican Party has had to do that. Democratic Party had to do it as well. That process needs to begin not just for the sake of those parties, but for the sake of the American political system. And that, Mark, is my bottom line. And the one thing I'm grateful for, and I hope people do support the Mark Thompson program. And, I'm not compensated for what I do with Mark. This to me is this is an act. It's a very important act, but a Mark Thompson or a John Rothman or a Nikki Maduro or a Kim McAllister, we can only flourish with the support of listeners who care as much as we do and hope that our reach extends. And Mark, that's my pitch for people to support you. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I think you can also, in addition to financial support, which of course keeps the lights on, just share things that you've heard. Maybe it's the segment with Rothman, whatever. Share it on your social media, and that supports the show as well. Because as we grow our footprint, we're able to sustain ourselves more easily. And
I have a friend in New York, Debbie, who listens regularly. And Debbie, if you're listening, I love you. What does she do? She posts this on her social media. And of course, the fact that she says, "And John, you're brilliant," is very acceptable in terms of the analysis.
Yeah. Right. Well, I hope she is indeed watching this show if she speaks to your brilliance. I think you're capable of brilliance is the way I would put it. I don't think you're always brilliant.
What?
And don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, no matter how much he insults me, I will be back again and again. Hey, Mark, I hope you will do another gathering which I know.
Yeah, you missed the last one. You just missed our end of summer. We'll do one for the holidays, I think.
Oh, maybe you should do one before the election.
Well, we may do that. They're a lot of trouble to pull together, although they're really great, and we had a real good one. So not a bad thought. Maybe we do one end of October. You know what I mean? That's not a bad thought. See, when you say things like that, I think you're brilliant. So that's the
What?
Okay.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, the abuse that a mere humble former radio talk show host takes from his colleague. But it's a pleasure. Anything else today?
Oh my God!
I know. I love my John Rothman. All right. No, we touched on the shooting in San Francisco of a major sports star. And what's happening in San Francisco and how the blame game is being played. We talked about Kamala Harris. We talked about the election. We talked about media. We talked about the Russia thing. We talked about the Middle East. The one thing I might ask you just to put a button on, I know it's hard, but maybe you can tell me what you think this state will come down to, is this Pennsylvania thing. Again, I'm not convinced, this is the reason I come back to it, I'm not convinced that Kamala Harris will win Pennsylvania. I know it's close. I see it as a far more problematic situation for her from an electoral standpoint than I might in other places. Can you speak to what is important in Pennsylvania?
The whole thing boils down to how many mistakes Donald Trump makes between now and the election. If Donald Trump continues to alienate voters, as I believe he does, if women understand what is at stake, if the Trump family is listened to, you just heard Fred Trump's comments about Donald Trump. If people listen, and I'm hoping that happens. By the way, in New Hampshire, the Republicans have stopped spending any money. They're not doing any media buys. They are conceding New Hampshire, which some thought was a swing state in a way, directly to Harris. Well, it's going to be a challenge. But I'll tell you one thing, Mark. If we were up and running in a radio station in Pennsylvania, the money would be pouring in for advertising. So that's the other thing. Maybe at some point we can do an analysis of the various ads. They're normally 30 seconds to a minute. And it's well worth listening to the ads because that's what is really selling the product. And isn't it a shame? Remember, Joe McGinnis wrote a book called The Selling of the President, 1968. People should go back and read it simply to remember that, in a sense, I remember vividly Adlai Stevenson saying, I don't want to be sold like a bar of soap. And that's what we've done. And so this is going to be interesting as well, the advertising.
Yeah, I mean, I would say one thing, John, everything has to be communicated and marketed. Ideas have to be communicated and marketed. So, yeah, it is the selling of the presidency, I'd suggest, is when the shingle is out and they're open for business and it's pay to play. The selling of ideas, I think that's become more complicated. This for another time. But you do have to sell ideas. But I'd love to continue with this conversation your next go round.
I agree. And ladies and gentlemen, do support the Mark Thompson program. And Mark, anytime you need me, if I'm available, I'm always here for you and for Kim. And I want to thank you both for having me today.
We love you, John, and welcome home. John Rothman, everybody.